Okay, so this is the pool, Edward Bloom's pool, when him and Sandra move into this house. This is the house. It's in Wetumpka. It's supposed to be Ashton, but when Edward is older, before Will comes to visit him, they show him swimming in the pool, and you can see Sandra watching him from that window right up there. And then later, they show Will cleaning the pool. He's right over there. Towards the end of the movie, they show his son in the water with, I don't know if it's a friend or another child of his, but I think he's like grilling or something, and Josephine is out there with him. You can still see the stone wall that wraps around, the stone that edges the pool, and just a really pretty house. And I'll go down and take a video of it from down below in the street view, which you also see. But this is the pool in the backyard from the house from Big Fish. That was the witch's house in Big Fish, and this would have been the front of the mansion that they used in the scene where the kids, Edward and Dawn and the two other kids, come to see how they're gonna die. They're gonna look in the witch's eye and find out how they go. So the top of it, right up here, there was like a digital animation. They added a different kind of a roof to it. And then along the front of it, they put the fence where the kids are all waiting for the witch to come out. All right, I'm here in Lounsboro, Alabama, and this church is the church that Edward Bloom is in when he is telling the story about how he started to grow. They show him sitting in a church service in the pew, and all of a sudden he starts busting through his shoes, his shirt button pops. But this is the church that they used to film that scene. This is the only time you see the exterior of it. Here's a quick shot of through a window of the church pew. This gives you an idea of what it looked like. Edward was sitting in there. All of a sudden during service, he started to grow. He was busting out of his clothes and shoes, and people were looking at him. I think like a button pops off his shirt and hits somebody sitting in front of him. And you also see Miley Cyrus briefly in this scene. She made a small appearance both here in this church and at the witch's house in the movie Big Fish. I'm here in Montgomery, Alabama now, and I'm here at what was serving as Ashton's baseball field. This is where Edward Bloom was playing baseball, and they show him like in the batter's box, hit a pitch. There's no home plate, but he would have been standing like right about here. The press box in the background looks pretty similar as it did then. It was red. I think it was all red, and it might have said Home of the Tigers, like right across the backside there. It didn't have that black circle on it with the line at all. Don Price would have been sitting like right here, and I think it was like after Edward hit like a home run, it went through the scoreboard or something like that, they show him and he's like sitting here, his head is like right here, and the press box is in the background. So this is the exact angle that they used for that. is the field that was used as the Ashton Tigers home football field in the movie Big Fish. So right where I'm standing is where one of the scenes was filmed, where Edward Bloom was running with the football towards me in the direction that I'm filming. If you can imagine that soccer goal that's in the picture wasn't there, you can see the football uprights right behind it, the old school uprights. Those are pictured in the movie, as well as the scoreboard right behind it. And three more things that you can clearly see in that shot: this telephone pole, these homes, and that wooden fence that runs over there. So they show Edward Bloom is running with the football towards where I'm filming, and right about in here is where he either like jumps on or jumps over. I think he kind of like jumps on the pile and like keeps running. Because later in the movie, when they do sort of like a flashback to that scene, they show Don Price was the guy that Edward like jumped on to get over the pile. He kind of like is on the ground, but he like lifts his head up, and he has like grass stuck in his face. So that happened right out here where I was standing. And then as Edward's running for a touchdown to the other end of the field, they do a flash scene over to the side here, and you'll probably recognize this tower over here, this press tower. I think it also said something like Home of the Tigers on it. But right in this area, right here on this grass, is where the cheerleaders were. Okay, I'm here in Wetumpka, and this was the scene in the movie where the mayor was standing up here on this ledge, and he's telling everybody, calm down, calm down. He's waving his arms. Everybody's in an uproar about Carl. So they filmed both of those scenes right here on this. There's some steps that come up here. It's that first section of steps. There's this little, like a landing that's here. So I'm gonna step up there and turn around and show you the other side. Okay, this probably looks familiar. So this is the view that the mayor would have had back towards town. This would have been, it's supposed to be Ashton, as I said, it's Wetumpka. It looks almost identical to what it did during filming, except for one thing. You'll see over here where that truck is parked, there's like a gravel lot. There used to be another building that was here. It's obviously not there any longer. But this would have been where the town gathering was, so all the people were kind of huddled here in the streets, and they got their guns, and they're all upset about Carl terrorizing their town. They want him gone. They're gonna do something about it if the mayor won't. And then, of course, Edward volunteers to talk to the giant, so the crowd kind of like splits apart, and he was standing like right here. So he's saying that he'll do it, and he'll go talk to him. So then he comes up here and talks to the mayor about how he's going to get Carl to leave town. But this is what it looks like, almost identical to what it looked like back when filming was done here in Wetumpka. Okay, so I'm in Tallahassee, Alabama, right alongside the river here, and this is the scene where Edward Bloom is going to confront Carl to see if he can get him to leave. This was actually a really tricky place to find the location, not necessarily roughly where it was filmed, but to try to narrow it down exactly where it was filmed. A lot has changed in what it's been about 15 years since the movie has been filmed when you're considering water. So this is obviously the river there. Kind of see through the trees, there's a bridge, and beyond that there's a dam. So the water level rises and falls all the time, so everything along the shoreline changes just with erosion and, you know, the high waters. So but I found the spot where Edward arrives at the cave. So I'm going to try to show you as best I can. It's really muddy in here. Straight through here, this is a fallen tree here, so that's why it's laying there. That was not obviously like that in the film, but right where I'm pointing along the water, try to zoom in, there's some flat rocks, and you can see those flat rocks right at the shelf of where Edward's walking the shoreline along this river. So this little, I'm gonna call it like a clearing, it's kind of grown in obviously since then. Right here is what started the path to the cave. The trees have fallen, so you have to envision it sort of opening up to the river if this were cleared out. And another thing to help me identify it, I'll try to zoom in across the river. There's a few trees right here. The pattern of those trees, when I look over Edward Bloom's left shoulder when they shot the scene, it would have put him standing right about here as he started to come up to the cave. So that was another thing that helped me figure out exactly where it was shot over here. And I'll swing around and I'll show you. So again, you have to envision this being cleared out. There's a lot of like brush and young saplings and small trees that have grown up here since the last time, well, since it was filmed. This is obviously cleared out, but you can almost see there's still sort of like a natural path right here from here. Ignore these trees, but from here to here. The cave would have been right up in here, and I'm going to show you. So Edward walked up here. This is all cleared out except for there was like a clear path except for some rocks that were pushed aside. And the cave would have been right here. Now some of you are probably disappointed, like, oh, there's not really a cave. No, there's not really a cave, but this is where the cave structure would have been built. Tim Burton is known for doing some really cool things with his sets. Rocks and trees, things of that nature. The cave was basically worked into the existing landscape. So yes, some of these rocks were obviously visible. Some of them were probably fake rocks that looked like styrofoam and used there. But I'm going to show you too, right when you get over here for this tree and that bush, everything beyond that way is very thick and grown in. And the same on this side. Well, there's like a ledge right here, but then it's all thick and it's all like overgrown. But here in this area, you can see it's open. From that tree to where I'm standing, it's just clear still until you get down here, that path that I just came up, which would have been right down there. Edward walks up to the cave and he's saying hello, and then you get the view of him, and I'll go to about where the cave opening would be. And that would have been behind him there, you know, where you see, you hear Carl say, "Go away," and he kind of like blows Edward and he kind of rolls. So I'm standing right about where the opening of the cave would have been in the movie. Another thing that kind of helped me identify where it was, if you remember, when Carl comes out of the cave, he comes over to the left of how I'm filming here, and there's like a big log that's sitting there, and he sits down on it, and it kind of like collapses, it crushes under his weight. You can see this tree over his left shoulder, I think, in that scene. The log that Carl sat on would have been like right here, and obviously it was fake. It wasn't a real log. He wouldn't have, you know, That was just another Tim Burton creation. But that's what Edward goes over there and talks about how they're going to get out of, leave Ashton and start this journey. But this is the location of the cave. Would have been right in here. And it is, while there's not an actual cave, it is, there's like all kinds of crevices. Like if you look here, that definitely extends into the hillside, as does that, even up in here. So I mean, there's definitely some small crevices all over this little like hillside. And another thing you kind of see in that scene, all above what would have been the top of the cave, there's like, this is sort of like the top of the little ledge. It's like a hill. All that brush that's up there, that was definitely visible in the scene as well. Carl and Edward were off to leave. They were leaving Ashton and they're off on their adventure. It's also when they had the parade. Okay, so this is another part of Wetumpka that was supposed to be Ashton. It's just down off the steps of the courthouse that I was just filming at, which is right over there. So the parade would have started here, and this is where you see the people were lined on each side of the street here and over here, sending Carl and Edward off, wishing them luck. There's a guy who stands over here who says, "What's your pride, Edward Bloom?" You can see this building in the background of that scene too. So when Edward and Carl are walking, this building is very visible in that scene as well. In this town, so I was here 9 or 10 years ago. It looks very much the same as it did back then. It's just one of those towns that it just has like a cool old school historical feel to it, and not much has changed. They also showed part of that parade. It would have been right out here too. So the little like cars were going around and the people were watching. If you remember, Don Price was watching the parade. So he would have been right up against this pole right here. He was smoking a cigarette. And the camera kind of like goes behind them, and then it shows, you can see what's a movie theater here, and then the bridge that they cross. This is right about where they shot the scene of Carl and Edward crossing the bridge to go to the river. So the parade and I think the Shriner cars were still buzzing around that scene, but right here is where they walk across. But that movie theater definitely looks the same. The bridge, I'll walk over there, that definitely looks the same. There's a lot of things that look very much like they did back when this movie was filmed, right here in Wetumpka. I'll show you this. There's another view of the town. See that house up on the hill? That's Edward Bloom's house. To Spectre. This would have been the pathway that Edward Bloom takes on his way. When him and Carl split up, he took the old way, and Carl took the paved way. It looks totally different than it did when I first came here. Everything in front of me here was all brush the last time I was here, brush and trees, and it was very wooded.
Here's a video standing at the exact same spot from about 10 years ago. This is the path, the road to Spectre that went through the dark forest. You can see how much different it used to look than it does now. This is really cool. Okay, here's the, you know, kind of like the pathway that he made, or makes his way through. It's still here. Okay, so this is the road to Spectre. This is a still from the movie. I want you to take note right where the arrow is, right where that red arrow is pointing to that little bit of a ledge of a rock that sticks out. Here's a still frame. You can clearly see this was shot right on that same part of the path leading to Spectre. And this is all a set. This is all like styrofoam essentially. It's supposed to look like rock. It's like a plastic styrofoam. And it sort of like makes the pathway to the entrance when he finds Spectre, which it really does lead to, which is kind of cool. But I'm not going to be able to get through the back end of it because it's really overgrown. But you can see the fake roots, tree roots. There's another really good shot of it over here. Right there. It's all the fake roots. And go through here. I don't know how much of this is coming through on this camera or not, but it really is cool / creepy to walk through here like this. Okay, now here is where the set really gets cool in my opinion. This is all fake tree. This is, if you even, I don't know if I can get in there close enough, there's actually like that rebar sticking out on the tip of that right there to try to hold this in place. And it has the moss, the roots, and the trees. Like, oh, it's real. And it's like styrofoam as well. Actually, it is. That's exactly what it is. The top of it's all white still. But this is a really good shot. I think this is where all those spiders were getting him. And it leads straight ahead.
There's actually a little bit of the remains of what was the pathway. You can see right here, some like loose gravel, and it kind of splits these trees. There's the pear trees there, the pear trees here. If you go straight through here, this is what the original path to Spectre, the road to Spectre, would have looked like, where it was when they had it during filming. So it was all overgrown, and there was fake rocks and trees that were on either side. So it kind of made like a little bit of almost like he was walking in a ravine. Almost made it look like Edward was walking in a ravine. And it was all styrofoam and rebar, and it was painted to make it look like that was this path that he was walking on. So this is where the bird takes his hat and he throws I think it was like a rock, hits the beehive. The bees chase him through. Then he gets up here a little farther, and here's where the spiders, the jumping spiders, I think were. That was all right in through here, but it was so thick and overgrown that you couldn't see how close you were to actual, Spectre itself. The tree roots and everything were here, and it made sort of a little bit of a turn when you got right over here, which leads to the actual opening, like that. So the road to Spectre really did lead directly to the movie set. So that I thought was pretty cool. So it would have come right through here. Right here, you would turn, and then you would enter. So it actually, a lot of times in movies, the continuity of it doesn't match up, but in this case, it actually does. The road leads right to the set of Spectre. This is awesome. I mean, the first time that I saw this movie, there was something captivating about seeing this arch and this town that lied on the other side of it. And I saw it and I'm like, I want to go find that place. Never really knowing that you'd have a chance to do it. Because most movie locations, such as this, they're a set. They're built, and then when the movie's done filming, they tear it down. The nice part about this is Tim Burton, from what I understand, had to pull out. He had other obligations and left the set intact. So over the years, it has, some of the buildings aren't there. You'll see in my other video that I'm going to splice in with this. It's those buildings are still intact, the ones that aren't here now from my older video, but they are in bad shape. So those are gone. But the set in general is actually, it's probably cleaner. It's more well maintained than the last time I was here almost 10 years ago. So I'm gonna walk through Spectre again, give you a tour. You're gonna hear some goats. You're gonna hear a lot of goats as I walk through here. There's probably 50 or 60 goats that are residents of this island now. The good thing about them, they actually maintain the vegetation, which from what I understand is they did a controlled burn, and it got out of hand and it burned down the 2 strip buildings in the middle of Spectre. So that is, from what I understand, why they aren't here any longer. But the good thing about the goats is they're keeping it nice and clean, and you don't have to worry about the fire. So obviously Edward comes through these trees, and this is where he discovers Spectre. So he literally is going to walk right through here, and these trees are actually fake. This is all styrofoam, and you can see like the bars. Some of it is like poles, some of it is like rebar, but they really do look, they look just as you would expect the kind of trees that are here. You can see some of the Spanish moss growing off of these trees beside it. They really do blend in well. But this is what a lot of the trees look like on the road to Spectre. You can see like the roots, I don't know, sort of like old, I don't want to call it creepy, but it just looks like what a Tim Burton tree you'd expect him to use in one of his movies. But that's what these are. These are artificial man-made trees, and this is how you would get into Spectre. So Edward Bloom walks in here and sees Spectre. You see the shoes are still up on the line. Obviously those are not the ones from the movie. Over the years, people have come and thrown their shoes up on the line. I'll probably do the same. I have another pair with me. But yeah, they cut them down and then they put a new line up, and people start throwing them up there again. Oh, I almost walked past it. This is pretty cool. A nice added touch. So yeah, welcome to Spectre. It's really, really cool. Last time I was here, as I said, it was in the summer. It was like 99 or 100 degrees. It was extremely humid. Today, totally different. I'm here in early March, but it's 70 degrees and sunny today, so a much more comfortable day to walk through here too. There's a look back. Obviously you can see the shoes and the tree. Now, when Edward first arrives here at Spectre, there is not a road here like there is now. It's all grass, and no one wore shoes, hence the reason why they're all thrown up on the wire. This is one of the first houses that he looks at when he arrives. So as he's walking down here, there's a guy sitting on the porch right here on a glider, and he's strumming a banjo, I think. And you hear the song that is sort of synonymous with the movie Deliverance. The funny thing is the actor, the guy who's actually playing that banjo sitting on that glider right here, was the little boy from the movie Deliverance. So I actually thought that was really, really, really cool that they worked that in. A lot of these are, I'm going to try to show you as many as I can. A lot of them are either closed up like this, or there's nothing inside of them. They're just facades. But I'll take a peek in the ones that I can and show you what I mean. And I'll tell you about the ones that were actually finished out for filming. This was one that was not used as far as the interior, but I'll just show you inside what it looks like. This actually has, a lot of these are shelters for the goats, so you can see the hay that they're being, they're fed, and they can come right underneath here and they can bed down or get out of the elements. But you can see how it's open in here. It's like unfinished. Some of them don't even have backs on them like this one does. This one actually some of the backs may have been added now that the goats are here, because I remember a lot of them were just like a tarp. They weren't even finished out in the back. But if you didn't, there's no reason that they had to finish these out when they were building them for the movie, because if you weren't shooting anything inside, there was no need. It was just basically what you were going to see from the front of them, the facade, and that's what was kept intact. This one here, they don't show anything from the inside of it, but you do see several shots of this front little porch with these columns as they film back towards it. So it doesn't have any interior shots that were shown, but you do see the front porch from a few shots. And again, it's all unfinished. It's actually another room off of this one. And the goats have pretty much taken over residency of all these places. Now you notice in the back corner here, there's like a chimney type thing. That's for the outside. It makes it look like, there must be like a wood burning stove or something in there from the exterior, but the inside, that's all that it is. This one still has some glass intact. This is another one that was not shown on the inside. Again, last time I was here, not many of these had anything inside of them, but they're definitely more, I don't want to call it renovated, but there's definitely been some work done to them because of the goats being here. Before, none of that was really in there. Now here's where things really have changed since the last time I was in Spectre, and why it probably looks very different if you are familiar with the movie. There used to be a strip of buildings that were attached here and over here. Here's some video of the exact same spot about 10 years ago. This is some old footage I had back when the strips of stores and shops in the middle of Spectre once stood. Those are gone. Those are, from what I understand, are the ones that caught fire. This would have been the center of Spectre. This is like right in the middle. This is where the lights would have been strung across the top and where they were dancing. It's also when Edward first arrives to Spectre, he meets Mayor Beeman, who would have come out right about here. So that building would have stretched from about here to right here in front of me, and it was probably maybe 4 or 5 buildings on each side. 4 or 5 that were connected over here, 4 or 5 that were connected over here, and it made it look like like the downtown part of Spectre, if you will. So Mayor Beeman comes out of that building, and that was one that was finished out on the inside. Even though they don't go into it in the movie, they show him step out with like his little clipboard. It says, "Welcome to you," and comes over and explains to him how they weren't expecting him yet. Even though they don't go into that building, he comes out of it and the doors open, so they did finish that out. Here's a look inside the building the mayor comes out of. this is one of the casualties of the controlled burn that they had. So from what I understand, it got out of control and it burned it down, and I had to take it. I think it was damaged and had to take it down. But honestly, when I was here last time, a lot of the awnings had fallen off. They were in pretty much need of either being they were in disrepair, is the way I would kind of describe it. So they either needed to be torn down or rebuilt, and obviously it was the tearing down that happened to it. But this is this is the place right here where I'm standing. I'll go right to like the center. This is right here is about the dead center in the middle between the two buildings, and this is where they would have done the famous dancing scene. So they would have been dancing and spinning, and you're gonna go, and that just part cracks me up because you see Mayor Beeman and they're like doing like funny faces as they spin, and they turn around, and then of course Norther is here too, so he's dancing around behind him. But that's a definitely funny scene, and it happened right there in the middle of Spectre. Now here's where things are a little more finished out, or were at the time. So I talked about there being a few others that were finished out. I'm going to show you the strip that was over here. The very end one was here. If you remember, when Edward comes back to Spectre to buy it, they were auctioning off the town, and there was an auctioneer that was like standing on the front of the store. Like right out on the front door, and there's like a crowd kind of like standing where I am looking back towards him. Even though they didn't go inside that one, that was a finished out one. This one was not finished out, but I always thought it was pretty cool with this little porch that was over here, right off here on the side. Looks pretty much the way most of the other ones do. That's funny. This is all kinds of shoes, probably from one of the lines they cut. So a lot of old shoes that have been retired here. There used to be an old glider. I think it was right up against here, if I remember correctly. Like an old glider that was there from the movie. It's obviously gone now. Now this one's sort of crumbling, so I'm gonna probably not step into it. You can see the frame on here, it's just up here. I don't know if you can tell from what I'm filming, but it definitely is sort of like hanging here. But there's nothing inside. All right, we're down here towards the very end. There's the church directly ahead. And I'll show you these buildings here. The last time I was here, if you remember, there were a lot of rocking chairs that were here at Spectre, and a couple of them, they were in kind of beaten up. They were in kind of bad shape. but one of the rocking chairs was actually still in here, but it's obviously been removed. There's a couple of windows on the side of this one too. Now this is Mayor Beeman's house. This is one that was finished out on the inside. So I'll step in here and we could talk about it. And actually they have a sign. You can see that's it's been added since the last time I was here. I don't remember seeing it. Okay, so stepping in here, you're probably gonna recognize the fireplace. So during filming, this is where the table would have been right in front of me here. There was a fire burning. Edward was here at the table. The mayor was here. Norther was here. And I guess it's the mayor's wife. She was kind of walking around serving them pie. And then Jenny was here too. I think she sat over here and got under the table. That's where she took off Edward's shoes and ran out. So this one, aside from the fireplace, it's the only one that they shot anything inside. The other ones that were finished out, as I said, they didn't shoot inside them. But you can see how the rest of them, whereas the rest of them had just like backs with nothing or open floors, this one has windows all the way around. That's a window there, it's being obstructed by some of the panels. Has windows all around, has wood on the walls, has a finished out floor, obviously the fireplace. But this one is, completely done, because from the different angles and everything they had to film in, and they wanted to make it look like it was a home, a house. It has a little back porch that you do not see, but they still put this on for the movie. That's beautiful. I'll talk more about this river here in a little bit. And right there's the church. Yeah, but this is where they would have had, they would have been eating the pie. Jenny takes the shoes, and this is where Edward is sort of getting an introduction to Spectre. And I'll take you over to the last building that's here, which is the church. This is also one that was not shown as far as the interiors go, but it sort of does a nice job of framing the town. You know, you see it all the way down here at the end, and it's now home, like a shelter for the goats. The doors are locked on it now. I actually checked it earlier when I got here, but I can probably show you through the window. Just sort of like a ramp that's there, but there was never anything inside of it. It's really, the window's dirty, but that's an unfinished inside. And so that's it. That's the tour and walkthrough of Spectre. It's awesome being back here. It poured yesterday. I don't know the order that I'm gonna put some of my other locations in on this video from yesterday, but you can see today, it's the first day that I've had like blue skies and sunshine on this trip, so I'm glad it's the day that timed up with when I came back to Spectre. It's just one of those movies, like, I love it. One of my favorite movies. One of those movies that I saw and wanted to come see where they filmed it, and never realizing that you'd have an opportunity like this to be on the set of it. It's just a movie that, I don't know, you just connect, it just speaks to you. That's what it was for me. I love the story. I love the way that the movie was produced. I love the message. I love the scenery, and just one of those places. This, you know, I filmed a number of movie locations over the years, and this is easily one, if not the most exciting movie location that I've been to, because you can come and like literally walk through and see it all over again. So the road, I talked about how when Edward first arrives, it's obviously grass, but if you remember when he came back, when the town was being auctioned, It had kind of fallen in shambles, and the road had been put in, which actually, as they say in the movie, brought in outsiders and it changed everything. So yeah, it's remained. It'd be kind of cool one day if they were able to pull it up and, you know, get it back to its original state of grass, but that's what it looks like now. And you see some campers and RVs and things over there. You can actually stay out here on this island. You can come and fish and stay, which I thought was really cool. And this is it. So at the end of the movie, where Edward tells him, not at the end of the movie, I'm sorry, at the end of his first visit to Spectre, Edward tells him that he's got to go. You know, they're all asking him, oh, you know, why no one's ever left, and he ends up leaving, and he promises Jenny that he'll come back, which he did, but just not when she thought he would. But the scene where when it's still grass here, when Jenny takes the shoes, they run. She ends up running over here, throws them up on this wire, and that's where Edward's like, hey, I needed those. You know, they're asking him, how are you gonna make it without your shoes? And I think he says something like, I suspect it'll hurt, but he does leave. And he does come back, but right up here is where she threw those shoes. And then he passes back through the trees, and he goes back in search of Carl. And actually, when he walks back through, now that I think about it, when he leaves Spectre, he goes back in through that road here, and that's when the trees sort of like grab a hold of him, and he's like, hey, this isn't how I'm supposed to die. They release, and then he lets go, and he walks out without his shoes and meets up with Carl. But this is it. This is where that was all filmed. Spectre. Alright, I'm in Montgomery, Alabama, and I'm at Huntington College. Huntington College filled in for Auburn University in the movie Big Fish. So when Edward Bloom was off to find Sandra Templeton, he was told that she went to Auburn, so he shows up here, and they show him there's a fountain right here. So Edward is like over here. He's like right here at this fountain. I think he puts like his hands in the water and maybe like puts it in his hair. He does that right here at this fountain. And so they filmed that scene from here shooting back towards the fountain. But it's a really pretty school. It's small, which is probably why it was easier for them to shoot the Auburn scenes here than actually up in Auburn at Auburn University. But this is that location for the fountain scene when Edward's arriving at Auburn in the movie. Okay, so this building directly in front of me was Sandra's sorority house in Big Fish. So Edward, after arriving here at what was supposed to be Auburn University, they show him walking down this sidewalk right here. A few things have changed on the house since filming. One, there was no ramp right here, it just had the steps that he walked up. And 2, if you remember, Sandra's room would have been up there. It had the sorority letters for the house below it. And the coloring is a little different. But so he would have walked right up to the door, you know, knocked on it. And then Sandra opened the door and informed them that she was engaged to somebody else already. Okay, so I'm in the chapel at Huntington College that dubbed as a lecture hall at Auburn University. So Sandra would have been sitting in the classroom like right about up here, and a professor would have been right in here, and he was using an overhead projector. So he's changing out some of the sheets. I'm pretty sure they show like a close-up of the professor, and you can definitely see these pipe organs and the stained glass windows in that shot. But he switches it out, and of course one of them says, "I love Sandra Templeton," with a heart around it. So yeah, Edward, you know, put that in the rotation of ones that he was going to show. So everyone's sort of laughing at Sandra, and they show her sitting here. But this is the lecture hall that they used for that scene. It was supposed to be at Auburn. I'll go show you another angle that they used. So when they show Sandra kind of getting embarrassed about what Edward had done, but sort of enjoying it too, she was in the 4th row back, in the fourth seat in. Her seat was right here. So that's the one that she was sitting in when they show her. So everyone's up. So everyone's up front is kind of turning around, and everyone beside her is sort of looking in at her, and she's just laughing but embarrassed. But this is where they filmed that. I'll show you the exact seat. It's this one right here. So that's the one that she was sitting in. And then this is where the professor would have had the overhead projector, and then it was projected up there onto its screen. And that was what they filmed inside this building here at Huntington College. And as I mentioned, it's supposed to be Auburn University in the movie Big Fish. Okay, so this is the exact spot that they filmed the scene where Sandra and her friends are walking, and one of them like nudges her to look up, and she looks up into the sky, and Edward had the plane with the smoke streaming behind it doing the letters in the sky. So there'd have been like a heart right here with "I love Sandra" written in the middle. But you can tell this is the exact spot that they filmed it in because of this steeple and the way this annex comes off the side with the windows protruding from the roof. If you walk around other sections of this building, it doesn't quite match that. So it would have been right here. This is the exact spot that they filmed at. And I think Sandra and her friends would have been walking like right along here when, you know, one of them told her to, I think that she like nudges her to look up or something. So when Sandra looks to the sky, right here is where you can see that written in the sky, "I love Sandra." They actually show this view from directly above where I am at, because when Edward comes back and puts all the daffodils out here, they were all out here on the lawn. Here, all out here. So they show Sandra like looking down from that window that's now behind me. And Edward would have been standing like right out here in a suit, like waiting, just standing out here waiting for her. friends walking towards Edward and Sandra. So they would have been coming right on this road right here, and Don was kind of leading the charge. So this tree, same tree, is right there, and you can see the brick and mortar, how it's kind of like, almost makes like a striping pattern. You can see that in the background, as well as that light pole right here. So they come walking through here, and as soon as Don hits this grass, he already is into the daffodils. This was all daffodils here. This whole quad was like covered in daffodils. And that's Sandra's sorority house. When Edward's laying in the daffodils after Don beat the hell out of him, you can see this building very clearly in the one shot. But all this was daffodils out in this quad. Alright, so I'm showing you a building that wasn't featured from the exterior in the movie Big Fish, but it was from the inside. It's this one right here, the one with the windows that go all the way across that I'm pointing to. That, if you remember correctly, when Edward got the job as like a traveling salesman, he was in an office, and I think it was like a contraption called like the Handymatic or something. It was like one of those multifaceted tool things. Well, he's in there in an office with another guy, and it's right inside that building there. Even though this building didn't make an appearance from the exterior in the movie, that is where they shot that scene, from inside that building. Here in Wetumpka, Alabama. And this is where Edward and Sandra had their, I guess would have been their first home that they show. Actually have been like a trailer park. It had some trailers lined up on this side, over here on this side, and there was like a little bit of a lane, kind of looked like almost like a dirt lane that went like this way. You can see Edward riding his motorcycle on, and then he cuts over on. So they set this up. It's actually a parking lot that I'm standing in behind some businesses in downtown Wetumpka. But the way that you could tell that this is where they shot it, first of all, this tree, you can see the split. It has the Y that's right here, this limb that comes down. The tree was smaller then. That was an easy way to tell. And the bridge is right there that you could obviously see when they filmed that scene. But also, unfortunately, you can't see now, and I'm going to get to that in a minute. There were a couple steeple tops across the river for some churches. There was one that was extremely visible in that shot that's no longer there. That's because a tornado hit about 2 months ago, and it's very sad. There's a lot of buildings and churches that were completely wiped out over there. A bunch of big trees that were damaged as well. But in the movie, you could see the church steeple tops across the river. You could kind of see one right here. The top of it is still intact, but one of them was fractured, and the other one, there was a beautiful white church that was right on the intersection over here that I'll show you in the scene where Carl flips the car over. That church is completely gone. But this is where they shot that scene. So Edward, they show him riding off, and Sandra's watching him. He's on his motorcycle. He comes down that pathway that's behind me that I showed you, and then he kind of makes like a left turn and goes off in that direction. Okay, I'm in Wetumpka, Alabama, and this building directly in front of me here was the building that was used as the bank that Northern ends up robbing in the movie Big Fish. So the opening scene of that section of the movie had that clock. You see it says First National Bank. It was very visible in that scene. Edward didn't come here to rob the bank. If you remember, he ended up running into Northern inside the bank. So Edward had parked his car right over here. So it wasn't until he walked inside that he ran into Northern. So he essentially becomes an accomplice when he's in there with them. But when they come running out of the bank, they come through this door right here. So they come out onto the sidewalk, and if you remember, Edward comes this way, Norther turns and starts running up the sidewalk. You can see that telephone pole there, but the car, the Charger, would have been parked right here. So they both get into the Charger. They go in this direction, and if I remember correctly, they do like a U-turn, and then they head off that way. So this is the part of town that they speed off in that direction, just as that car is going there. So they head off there. So this is Edward Bloom's house. This is the house that he bought for Sandra when they were able to start progressing in their life. He talked about buying her a proper home with the white picket fence, and this is it. And it looks very much like it did for the movie. And from what I understand, this upper part right here, I think I read that was added on for the movie. I'm not quite sure, but I believe that was the case. But be that as it may, it looks almost exactly the way it does or did back in filming. So they show the house a number of times. They show Will and Josephine. They come here. Sandra, his mom, they would have met out here and were talking about how long his dad had, and she said we don't discuss that. There's the steps that lead up to the house. They show Sandra and Will when they're little. She's in the yard and Will's over here with her, and Edward's off on a work trip. But it's just a beautiful home. It sits up on this hill and it overlooks Wetumpka, and you can see it from the other side of the river. It's perched up here pretty nicely. And downtown is right around the corner there, so it's very close. But this is the house. This is Edward Bloom's house, and it's supposed to be, the town is called Ashton in the movie. It's actually Wetumpka, Alabama. But very, very nice home. And from what I understand, I mentioned this in another clip though, I do believe some of the scenes of the interior were shot right here on site. I went to a real estate listing of this house one time, and the kitchen definitely matches up to what was shot when Will runs into the doctor when he's back here to visit his dad. As for Edward Bloom's room when his dad is laying in bed, he's not feeling well, I don't know if that's the case. I want to say it might have been up in here because I remember there being windows on different walls when his dad's laying there in bed, but that you would have to get a tour of the home to see, which they don't offer. But anyway, this is the house from Big Fish. This is Edward Bloom's house here in Wetumpka, which served as Ashton. Oh, one more thing, the pool. Up the steps, there's like a terrace that's up there. The pool is up behind the house, so it does exist. Alright, I'm here in Millbrook, Alabama, and this is the road right here, this little causeway that takes you over to Jackson Lake Island, which is over there. And that's where the town of Spectre and where Jenny's house stood for the movie Big Fish. So this road that I'm trying to show you, it's right here. I don't know how clearly it's coming through, but it's like maybe 5 or 6 feet above the water. Runs over there is where they show Will on his way to talk with Jenny. This is before his, later in the movie when he wants to find out about things about his father. They shot it from right this angle, and you see Will driving his car right across on his way over to Spectre, and I'm going to show you that when I walk across there. the views that they show of when Will comes to Jenny's house. They show it from this angle, but the water is really high right now, so it's sort of hard to get an exact look as what it looked like back when the movie was filmed. But these are the pillars for Jenny's house. So the camera was kind of moving. It did a scene where the water actually did cut inland right here. Didn't come up as high as where it is now. But when Will drove his car up to the house, the camera kind of pans along the side. So the water that you see right here is what would have been the pool of water that you see in that shot. And the pillars that are right here in front of me are the original pillars from what was Jenny's house in the movie Big Fish. So again, as I mentioned in another part of the video, I was here about 10 years ago when everything was still intact. So I was here when the house once stood here.
Hey, this is Jenny's house from the movie Big Fish. I almost forgot it was here. After going through the brush, I saw a pavilion on the other side of this little island, peninsula or whatever, and it reminded me that it was here. I'd have been so disappointed if I forgot to come look for this, but it is awesome. I mean, it literally sits right on the water. The water comes right up. The back of this house is actually up on like stilts. But you know, in the movie they show where it was real nice and then it got run down and then they fixed it up and then it was overgrown or whatever. But also they filmed it here. And I remember there being scenes shot in this one as well. Steps are in pretty decent shape. These pillars are pretty cool. You know, if someone had a little place like this, obviously fixed up right on the water like this, it would be so nice. This is the inside of it, and you see this back wall is pretty much gone now, but you are right over the water. And it is a beautiful view out here. There's those trees I was talking about. That's so pretty. That's her house.
It's obviously no longer here because of the floodwaters, and it was already sort of on a downward spiral. It had to be totally removed, but they did leave the pillars for the front, and then some of these stakes that you see in the water out here were where the house was built, right out over to the water. So it was right on the edge of this river. Jenny living here. She's given piano lessons. Edward comes to visit her here. Will comes and visits her here. Carl's here and pushes up the sides of the house. So that would have been right over here, is where he was pushing on the house. Get it to stand upright. But it was sort of like the set of the Spectre. The inside of it was somewhat finished out. By the time I had been here to see it, it had been sitting for probably, I don't know, 7 or 8 years. So there were scenes filmed inside of it, but it looked more like the unfinished sets that you saw over at Spectre on this video. So you were able to like walk up onto the porch, and then you, like right here would have been the steps, and then you went straight into there was a door here, and then there was a door on the back side of it that looked over the water. There was a little porch that was over here on the side. There's actually a placard here, and it can maybe put it into perspective a little better than just talking about it. So this is the house. So there's the 4 pillars that I was pointing out. They're right there.
And you can see how they're up on, these are the steps that you would have walked up on, and then there's some brickwork. That's where the house stood, and here's that porch that I was talking about that's over there. That's where the porch would have been. This is another picture of the house. This is when Carl was pushing it up and Edward's telling him how, you know, making it straight. So Carl would have been pushing the house. He would have been pushing it from right over here. And then you can see in that picture too, there was a fence. That fence isn't here, that was just put in for the movie. But the fence would have been right out front here of the house. This is what the inside of the house looked like. It was finished out and they did shoot a few scenes. You'll see that there's a door right here. That was actually the back door. So the front door would have been right in between these two pillars. Right here, you walked up the steps, you split the pillars, you went into the front door. Front door would have been here. When you went into the house, the back door was on that far side. And that's where you could see Jenny, when she's older, talking with Will sitting in the couch. So that would have been in that part of the house when this was filmed. Okay, so I'm here in Prattville, and this is the location that was used for the hospital scene when Will was trying to get Edward out of here right before he passed away. So he was telling him a story. If you remember, he had him in a wheelchair, and they came shooting through this entryway right here, and he jumps the curb. And they come over here to where the red Charger was parked, which is right about where these two red cars are parked. You can actually see that pole in the scene, but right over here is the curb that he jumped. So he would have come out those doors right here, right over that curb, and into the parking lot. I don't know if the inside of it was filmed here or not. I'm not certain, but this is the route that he would have taken. So these doors right here would have opened up. He would have come flying through here, pushing his dad in the wheelchair, right over the lip into the Charger that was waiting in the parking lot.
in Wetumpka, Alabama, and this is the bridge that they show Edward and Will at the end of the movie racing across in the Charger. So they would have come from town where that car is coming from, that white car right there. They would have gone right along the bridge like this and driven in this direction. So they have like an overhead view, you know, an aerial view during that scene. Obviously I can't do that, but they show them like weaving in and out of traffic, crossing this bridge. And one of the things that's very noticeable is the arches that are on this bridge in that scene. So you can see those as they cross the river, or I'm sorry, yeah, cross the river to get to the river. But this is the bridge that they race through, and they'll get to the other side, and I'll show you the scene from there. This is the scene that they shot where Carl tips the car over. The car would have been right here. It would have been like kind of sitting sideways, and you would have seen this traffic light, and this white church is back there. Now that probably looks different than it does in the movie. It's because that church was damaged by the tornado that went through here. So there used to be a tall steeple, white steeple that was right here in that church. It's gone. But this is where Carl would have been standing when they come across the bridge, which is right here. They come across the bridge like this car is. They go to make the turn, but it's blocked, so Carl tips the car over, and then they show the Charger scream around the corner. Okay, I'm here in Deatsville, Alabama, and this is the location that was used for Edward Bloom's funeral at the end of the movie. It wasn't the final scene, but it was one of the last scenes shot. That's sort of the angle that they show initially. It's kind of higher up, but they show everybody pulling in here to the church that's up ahead for the service. They actually never show the inside of the church. You only see the front and the side of it. So the cars would have all been parked out here. And I'll take you over to the exact spot that they used for the service, for the funeral. Okay, so I'm gonna walk you around over here and show you exactly where Edward Bloom would have been buried in the movie. It's not an actual grave. They had a casket laid out on the spot that I'll show you. But this is where they would have shot that scene. So you can clearly tell we're over here on the side of the church now. There's 3 headstones that make this very easy to pick out as to where exactly it was shot. The first one is this one here, this tall one. It sort of looks like the Washington Monument. The second one is this small one right here. Danny DeVito's character would have been standing right here where I'm pointing. And lastly, there's another one that's sort of taller off in the background that you can see the side of it right there. So it's those 3 things. And the casket would have been right here. It would have had like a green, green cover that was like beneath it, resting on the ground, and the casket would have been right on top of it. But this is where he would have been laid to rest in the movie Big Fish. It was, I believe it was the next to last scene in the movie. But right there where the mud is kind of pulling up, that puddle's sort of pulling up in the mud. This is where they filmed that exact location of Edward Bloom's funeral service. And then at the end, they sort of show the side of the church. I think you can see like Carl, maybe he was getting into the car, or they kind of pan up alongside of the church.